The economy of Israel is a highly developed free market economy. The prosperity of Israel's advanced economy allows the country to have a sophisticated welfare state, a powerful modern military said to possess a nuclear weapons capability with a full nuclear triad, modern infrastructure rivaling many Western countries, and a high-technology sector competitively on par with Silicon Valley. It has the second-largest number of startup companies in the world after the United States, and the third-largest number of NASDAQ-listed companies after the US and China. American companies, such as Intel, Microsoft, and Apple, built their first overseas research and development facilities in Israel. More than 400 high-tech multinational corporations, such as IBM, Google, Hewlett-Packard, Cisco Systems, Facebook, and Motorola have opened R&D centers throughout the country. The country's major economic sectors are high technology and industrial manufacturing. The Israeli diamond industry is one of the world's centers for diamond cutting and polishing, amounting to 23.2% of all exports. As the country is relatively poor in natural resources, it consequently depends on imports of petroleum, raw materials, wheat, motor vehicles, uncut diamonds, and production inputs. Nonetheless, the country's nearly total reliance on energy imports may change in the future as recent discoveries of natural gas reserves off its coast and the Israeli solar energy industry have taken a leading role in Israel's energy sector. Israel's quality higher education and the establishment of a highly motivated and educated populace is largely responsible for ushering in the country's high technology boom and rapid economic development by regional standards. The country has developed a strong educational infrastructure and a high-quality business startup incubation system for promoting cutting-edge new ideas to create value-driven goods and services. These developments have allowed the country to create a high concentration of high-tech companies across the country's regions. These companies are financially backed by a strong venture capital industry. Its central high-technology hub, the Silicon Wadi, is considered second in importance only to its Californian counterpart. Numerous Israeli companies have been acquired by global multinational corporations for their profit-driven technologies in addition to their reliable and quality corporate personnel. In its early decades, the Israeli economy was largely state-controlled and shaped by social democratic ideas. In the 1970s and 1980s, the economy underwent a series of free market reforms and was gradually liberalized. In the past 3 decades, the economy has grown considerably, though GDP per capita has increased faster than wages. Israel is the most developed and advanced country in West Asia, possessing the 17th largest foreign exchange reserves in the world and the highest average wealth per adult in the Middle East, numbered 10th worldwide by financial assets per capita. Israel is the 9th largest arms exporter in the world and has the highest number of billionaires in the Middle East, ranked 18th in the world. In recent years, Israel has had among the highest GDP growth rates within the developed world along with Ireland. The Economist ranked Israel as the 4th most successful economy among developed countries for 2022. The IMF estimated Israel's GDP at $564 billion and its GDP per capita at $58,270 in 2023, 13th highest in the world, a figure comparable to other highly developed countries. Israel was invited to join the OECD in 2010. Israel has also signed free trade agreements with the European Union, the United States, the European Free Trade Association, Turkey, Mexico, Canada, Ukraine, Jordan, and Egypt. In 2007, Israel became the first non-Latin American country to sign a free trade agreement with the Mercosur trade bloc. The British Mandate for Palestine that came into effect in 1920 aimed at restricting land purchases by Jewish immigrants. For this reason, the Jewish population was initially more urban and had a higher share in industrial occupations. This particular development resulted economically in one of the few growth miracles of the region, whereby the structure of firms was determined mainly by private businessmen rather than by the government. The first survey of the Dead Sea in 1911, by the Russian Jewish businessman and engineer Moshe Novomysky, led to the establishment of Palestine Potash Ltd. In 1930, later renamed the Dead Sea Works. In 1923, The businessman and hydraulic engineer Pinchas Ruttenberg was granted an exclusive concession for the production and distribution of electric power. He founded the Palestine Electric Company, later the Israel Electric Corporation. Between 1920 and 1924, some of the country's largest factories were established, including the Shemin Oil Company, the Société de Grands Moulins, the Palestine Silicate Company, and the Palestine Salt Company. After statehood, Israel faced a deep economic crisis, as well as having to recover from the devastating effects of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. It also had to absorb hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees from Europe and almost 1 million from the Arab world. Israel was financially overwhelmed and faced a deep economic crisis, which led to a policy of austerity from 1949 to 1959. Unemployment was high, and foreign currency reserves were scarce. In 1952, Israel and West Germany signed an agreement stipulating that West Germany was to pay Israel to compensate for Jewish property stolen by the Nazis, material claims during the Holocaust, and absorption of refugees as a result. Over the next 14 years, West Germany paid Israel 3 billion marks, around $714 million according to 1953 to 1955 conversion rates, or equivalent to approximately $7 billion in modern currency. The reparations became a decisive part of Israel's income, comprising as high as 87.5% of Israel's income in 1956. Israel never had any formal diplomatic relations with East Germany. In 1950, the Israeli government launched Israel bonds for American and Canadian Jews to buy. In 1951, the final results of the bonds program exceeded $52 million. Additionally, many American Jews made private donations to Israel, which in 1956 were thought to amount to $100 million a year. In 1957, bond sales amounted to 35% of Israel's special development budget. Later in the century, Israel became significantly reliant on economic aid from the United States, a country that also became Israel's most important source of political support internationally. The proceeds from these sources were invested in industrial and agricultural development projects, which allowed Israel to become economically self-sufficient. The expansion of Israel's textile industry was a consequence of the development of cotton growing as a profitable agricultural branch. By the late 1960s, textiles were one of the largest industrial branches in Israel, second only to the foodstuff industry. Textiles constituted about 12% of industrial exports, becoming the second largest export branch after polished diamonds. In the early 2000s, Israeli companies had 30 plants in Jordan. Israeli exports reached $370 million a year, supplying such retailers and designers as Marks & Spencer, The Gap, Victoria's Secret, Walmart, Sears, Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, and Donna Karan. Two developments have helped to transform Israel's economy since the beginning of the 1990s. The first is waves of Jewish immigration, predominantly from the countries of the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union, that has brought over 1 million new citizens to Israel. These new Soviet Jewish immigrants, many of them highly educated, had a wellspring of scientific and technical expertise to help spur Israel's burgeoning technology sector, now constitutes some 15% of Israel's population. The second development benefiting the Israeli economy is the peace process that begun at the Madrid Conference of October 1991, which led to the signing of accords and later to a peace treaty between Israel and Jordan in 1994. In the 2000s, there was an influx of foreign investment in Israel from companies that formerly shunned the Israeli market. In 2006, foreign investment in Israel totaled $13 billion, according to the Manufacturers Association of Israel. The Financial Times said that bombs drop, yet Israel's economy grows. Moreover, while Israel's total gross external debt is $95 billion, or approximately 41.6% of GDP, since 2001 it has become a net lender nation in terms of net external debt, which as of June 2012 stood at a significant surplus of $60 billion. The country also maintains a current account surplus in an amount equivalent to about 3% of its gross domestic product in 2010. The Israeli economy weathered and withstood the late 2000s recession, registering positive GDP growth in 2009 and ending the decade with an unemployment rate lower than that of many of its Western counterparts. There are several reasons behind this economic resilience. For example, the fact that the country is a net lender rather than a borrower nation, and the government and the Bank of Israel's generally conservative macroeconomic policies. Two policies, in particular, can be cited. One is the refusal of the government to succumb to pressure by the banks to appropriate large sums of public money to aid them early in the crisis, thus limiting their risky behavior. The second is the implementation of the recommendations of the Bauhaus Commission in the early to mid-2000s, which recommended decoupling the bank's depository and investment banking activities, contrary to the then opposite trend, particularly in the United States, of easing such restrictions, which had the effect of encouraging more risk-taking in the financial systems of those countries. In May 2007, Israel was invited to open accession discussions with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. In May 2010, the OECD voted unanimously to invite Israel to join, despite Palestinian objections. It became a full member on September 7, 2010. The OECD praised Israel's scientific and technological progress and described it as having produced outstanding outcomes on a world scale. Despite economic prosperity, the Israeli economy faces many challenges. Some are short-term and some are long-term challenges. On the short term, its inability to duplicate its success in the telecommunication industry into other growing industries hampers its economic outlooks. Its inability to foster large multinational companies in the last decade also calls into question its ability to employ large numbers of people in advanced industries. On the long term, Israel is facing challenges of high dependency of the growing number of ultra-Orthodox Jews who have a low level of official labor force participation amongst men, and this situation could lead to a materially lower employment-to-population ratio and a higher dependency ratio in the future. The governor of the Bank of Israel, Stanley Fischer, stated that the growing poverty amongst the ultra-Orthodox is hurting the Israeli economy. According to the data published by Ian Fuzman, 60% of the poor households in Israel are of the Haredi Jews and the Israeli Arabs. Both groups together represent 25 to 28% of the Israeli population. Organizations such as the Kamak Foundation, Gvahim, Jerusalem Village, and the Jerusalem Business Networking Forum are addressing these challenges with job placement services and networking events. In 2017, 2.4% of the country's GDP is derived from agriculture. Of a total labor force of 2.7 million, 2.6% are employed in agricultural production, while 6.3% in services for agriculture. While Israel imports substantial quantities of grain, approximately 80% of local consumption, it is largely self-sufficient in other agricultural products and foodstuffs. For centuries, farmers of the region have grown varieties of citrus fruits, such as grapefruit, oranges, and lemons. Citrus fruits are still Israel's major agricultural export. In addition, Israel is one of the world's leading greenhouse food exporting countries. Israel also produces and exports flowers and cotton. The country exports more than $1.3 billion worth of agricultural products every year, including farm produce, as well as $1.2 billion worth of agricultural inputs and technology. Israel has over 100 active venture capital funds operating throughout the country with $10 billion under management. In 2004, international foreign funds from various nations around the world committed over 50% of the total dollars invested, exemplifying the country's strong and sound reputation as an internationally sought-after foreign investment by many countries. Israel's venture capital sector has rapidly developed from the early 1990s and has about 70 active venture capital funds, VC, of which 14 international VCs have Israeli offices. Israel's thriving venture capital and business incubator industry played an important role in financing the country's flourishing high-tech sector. Between 1991 and 2000, Israel's annual venture capital outlays, nearly all private, rose nearly 60-fold, from $58 million to $3.3 billion. Companies launched by Israeli venture funds rose from 100 to 800, and Israel's information technology revenues rose from $1.6 billion to $12.5 billion. By 1999, Israel ranked second only to the United States in invested private equity capital as a share of GDP. Israel led the world in the share of its growth attributable to high-tech ventures, 70%. Israel also has a small but fast-growing hedge fund industry. Within 5 years between 2007 and 2012, the number of active hedge funds doubled to 60. Israel-based hedge funds have registered an increase of 162% from 2006 to 2012, when they managed a total of $2 billion and employed about 300 people. The ever-growing hedge fund industry in Israel is also attracting a myriad of investors from around the world, particularly from the United States. Science and technology in Israel is one of the country's most highly developed and industrialized sectors. The modern Israeli ecosystem of high technology is highly optimized, making up a significant bulk of the Israeli economy. The percentage of Israelis engaged in scientific and technological inquiry and the amount spent on research and development, R&D, concerning gross domestic product, GDP, is among the highest in the world, with 140 scientists and technicians per 10,000 employees. In comparison, the same is 85 per 10,000 in the United States and 83 per 10,000 in Japan. Israel ranks fourth in the world in scientific activity, as measured by the number of scientific publications per million citizens. Israel's percentage of the total number of scientific articles published worldwide is almost 10 times higher than its percentage of the world's population. The country is home to over 1,400 life science companies, including about 300 pharmaceutical companies, 600 medical device companies, 450 digital health companies, and 468 biotechnology companies. Israeli scientists, engineers, and technicians have contributed to the modern advancement of the natural sciences, agricultural sciences, computer sciences, electronics, genetics, medicine, optics, solar energy, and various fields of engineering. The country has one of the world's technologically most literate populations. Israel has the second largest number of startup companies globally, behind only the United States, and remains one of the largest centers in the world for technology startup enterprises. As of 2013, around 200 startups were being created annually in Israel. In 2019, there were nearly 7,000 active startups operating throughout the country. In 2021, there were 79 Israeli-established tech unicorns, with 32 of them headquartered in Israel. More than one-third of cybersecurity unicorns in the world were Israeli in 2021. Israel is also home to nearly 400 research and development centers owned by various multinational companies, including prominent high-technology giants such as Google, Microsoft, and Intel. Israel is also a major semiconductor design hub. The country is home to numerous chip design centers owned by major multinational corporations and is considered as having one of the most advanced chip design industries in the world. In 2021, a total of 37 multinational corporations were operating in Israel in the semiconductor field. In recent years, the industry has faced a shortage of technology specialists. 15% of positions in the high-technology sector of Israel were unfilled as of 2019. However, the largest number of unfilled job positions, 31%, are in software engineering specialties, DevOps, backend, data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Therefore, salaries of specialists in the Israeli market also increased significantly. To solve this problem, IT companies look for filling the gaps abroad. Consequently, they employ about 25% of their entire workforce overseas. Most companies choose to hire employees from Ukraine, 45%, and the United States, with 16%, are the second most popular offshoring destination country. Historically, Israel relied on external imports for meeting most of its energy needs, spending an amount equivalent to over 5% of its GDP per year in 2009 on imports of energy products. The transportation sector relies mainly on gasoline and diesel fuel, while the majority of electricity production is generated using imported coal. As of 2013, Israel was importing about 100 million barrels of oil per year. The country possesses negligible reserves of crude oil but does have domestic natural gas resources which were discovered in more significant quantities starting in 2009, after many decades of previously unsuccessful exploration. Until the early 2000s, natural gas use in Israel was minimal. In the late 1990s, the government of Israel decided to encourage the usage of natural gas because of environmental, cost, and resource diversification reasons. At the time, however, there were no domestic sources of natural gas, and the expectation was that gas would be supplied from overseas in the form of LNG and by a future pipeline from Egypt, which eventually became the Arish-Ashkelon pipeline. Plans were made for the Israel Electric Corporation to construct several natural gas-driven power plants, for erecting a national gas distribution grid, and for an LNG import terminal. Recent discoveries, the results of 3D seismic surveys and test drilling conducted since 2010 have confirmed that an estimated 621 billion cubic meters, BCM, natural gas deposit named Leviathan exists in a large underwater geological formation nearby the large gas field already discovered in 2009. The Tamar field began commercial production on March 30, 2013 after 4 years of development. The supply of gas from Tamar was expected to aid the Israeli economy, which had suffered losses of more than $5.3 billion between 2011 and 2013 resulting from the disruption of gas supplies from neighboring Egypt. Industrial production of metals, machinery and electrical equipment, construction materials, consumer goods, and textiles, as well as food processing also form a significant part of the manufacturing sector. Machinery and equipment manufactured in Israel includes computer equipment, medical equipment, agricultural equipment, and robots. Israel has a successful semiconductor device fabrication industry, with several semiconductor manufacturing facilities in the country. One of the country's largest employers is Israel Aerospace Industries, which produces mainly aviation, space, and defense products. In 2017, the company had an order backlog of $11.4 billion. There are numerous other aerospace companies. Israeli aerospace companies are primarily sub-suppliers, focusing on fields such as machining, electronic systems and components, and composite materials. Israel is a major manufacturer and exporter of unmanned aerial vehicles. Israel also has a significant pharmaceutical industry and is home to Teva Pharmaceutical Industries, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, which employed 40,000 people as of 2011. It specializes in generic and proprietary pharmaceuticals and active pharmaceutical ingredients. It is the largest generic drug manufacturer in the world and one of the 15 largest pharmaceutical companies worldwide. In addition, Israel also has a shipbuilding industry through the company Israel Shipyards, which has one of the largest shipbuilding and repair facilities in the Eastern Mediterranean. For the civilian market, it builds merchant ships and other civilian watercraft as well as machinery for ports and heavy industries. It also builds naval craft for the defense market. Israel is one of the world's 3 major centers for polished diamonds, alongside Belgium and India. Israel's net polished diamond exports slid 22.8% in 2012 as polished diamond exports fell to $5.56 billion from $7.2 billion in 2011. Net exports of rough diamonds dropped 20.1% to $2.8 billion, and net exports of polished diamonds slipped 24.9% to $4.3 billion, while net rough diamond imports dropped 12.9% to $3.8 billion. Net exports and imports have dropped due to the ongoing global financial crisis, particularly within the Eurozone and the United States. The United States is the largest market, accounting for 36% of overall export market for polished diamonds, while Hong Kong remains at second with 28% and Belgium at 8% coming in third. As of 2016, cut diamonds were Israel's largest export product, comprising 23.2% of all exports. Israel is one of the world's major exporters of military equipment, accounting for 10% of the world total in 2007. 3 Israeli companies were listed on the 2010 Stockholm International Peace Research Institute Index of the world's top 100 arms-producing and military service companies: Elbit Systems, Israel Aerospace Industries, and Rafael Advanced Defense Systems Ltd. The defense industry in Israel is a strategically important sector and a large employer within the country. It is also a major player in the global arms market and is the 11th largest arms exporter in the world as of 2012. Total arms transfer agreements topped $12.9 billion between 2004 and 2011. There are over 150 active defense companies based in the country with combined revenues of more than $3.5 billion annually. Israeli defense equipment exports have reached $7 billion in 2012, making it a 20% increase from the amount of defense-related exports in 2011. Much of the exports are sold to the United States and Europe. Other major regions that purchase Israeli defense equipment include Southeast Asia and Latin America. India is also a major country for Israeli arms exports and has remained Israel's largest arms market in the world. Israel is considered to be the leading UAV exporter in the world. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Israeli defense companies were behind 41% of all drones exported in 2001 to 2011. Israel's defense exports in 2021 reached $11.2 billion in sales. Exports to Arab countries that joined the Abraham Accords made up 7% of all Israeli defense exports. In 2016, Israeli goods exports totaled $55.8 billion. It imported $61.9 billion worth of goods in the same year. In 2017, total exports, goods and services, amounted to $102.3 billion, while imports totaled $96.7 billion. Israel usually posts a modest trade deficit in goods. Its main goods imports consist of raw materials, crude oil, production inputs, and finished consumer goods. Most of its exports are high value-added items such as electronic components and other high-technology equipment, tools, and machinery, cut diamonds, refined petrochemicals, and pharmaceuticals. It normally posts a substantial trade surplus in services thanks to tourism and service industries such as software development, engineering services, and biomedical and scientific research and development. Therefore, overall external trade is positive, contributing to a significant current account surplus which as of 2017 stood at 4.7% of GDP. The United States is Israel's largest trading partner. Having moved away from the socialist economic model since the mid-1980s and early 1990s, Israel has made dramatic moves toward the free market capitalist paradigm. As of 2020, Israel's economic freedom score is 74.0, making its economy the 26th freest in the 2020 Index of Economic Freedom. Israel ranks 35th on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index. Israel's economic competitiveness is helped by strong protection of property rights, relatively low corruption levels, and high openness to global trade and investment. Income and corporate tax rates remain relatively high. As of 2020, Israel ranks 35th out of 179 countries in Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index.